Sustainable Markets Outlook. I need some panelists on stage. Please, Rafael Janequine, who's the Director for Standards & Poor's, and you'll need to give me a bit more details, Rafael, if I might. But also Sergio Robredo from CAF, Director of Financing and Investment for the Industry, VP Private Sector, and an incredibly important guy for you to catch at coffee if you're looking for sustainable finance. Also, Victor Zsigmond from BNDES, the champion of Brazil, and fundraising manager. And again, I'm going to ask Victor, and he may not be able to answer, what are your sustainable debt issuance plans and in different currencies? I'm just warning you now, And then finally, but most importantly, Carolina Grottera, who's the Ministry of Finance Program Director, is running a little bit late. She's, oh, you made it.
I made it.
I got told you were running a little bit late. My apologies. So we're lucky when I saw Carolina yesterday. We had I'm going to say, for me, a really exciting conversation about the breadth of work that the ministry is trying to tackle at the moment. I mean, I don't know how much he's going to be able to tell us, so this is a bit of a tease on my part. Really, this session is about what the future looks like. So let's start. You heard me talk about what we need to do, but what's realistic? Carolina, can I ask you to kick us off? Because, I mean, let's face it, everyone wants to hear what you're going to say. This is the most important part. Where are we going in terms of Brazilian policy, regulation, ambition on the part of the government as a context for the work of the rest of us, lesser mortals, on the panel?
Is it working? Can you hear me? Okay. Well, thank you, Sean. Thank you for the invitation. I made it on time. It was a miracle. It's such a pleasure. I'm very glad to be here representing the Ministry of Finance. May I switch to Portuguese? Okay. So, well, obrigada, gente.
Thanks, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. I think Sean was a bit too festive around his expectations. I hope I can answer some of that. Actually, we had a very interesting meeting in the Ministry of Finance yesterday, also with the Secretary of International Affairs and the Secretary of Economic Policies. So we see that there is a gathering of agents and secretaries and ministries mobilized around this theme. I haven't been around much time. I don't have much time to talk here today, but I want to give an overview of the ecological transformation plan and talk a bit more about some lines of action and some instruments that we've been mobilizing in this past year and the expectations and outlook for the next months and years. So I don't know how many of the audience know the ecological transformation plan from the federal government. I like to stress that it's not a plan from the Ministry of Finance. It belongs to the federal government, but it is spearheaded and centralized in the Ministry of Finance, in the Executive Secretary. Due to, Minister Haddad, he really defends this ecological agenda and the ecological transformation agenda, understanding that we won't be able to reach our economical and social objectives unless we also have a very specific focus and a full focus on the environment. We see all the issues in the south of Brazil, and it's not only the impacts that are regional on people's lives, but of course it is what's most relevant right now, but we also understand how this might affect our economy as a whole. So we are aware that from now on, we are going to go through increasingly more extreme events, which is going to have a bigger impact on our public accounts and the channeling of resources. So it is very important that this is fully integrated in our public policies as well as economic policies. Well, without further ado, the ecological transformation plan is organized in 6 axes. sustainable finance, technology advance, a third with bioeconomy and agro-food systems, and energy transition, circular economy, and finally, a new green infrastructure and adaptation. And as I said, it's not a plan that belongs to the Ministry of Finance. We do not own the plan, but we have a very important role as the center of the government into mobilizing and being able to make it feasible that other agents and other ministries might implement their actions and their specific programs. So the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Industry, Commerce and Services, Ministry of the Environment, even the International Affairs Ministry and other strategic partners such as BNDES, FINAP, and also mobilize international partners because it is a global agenda, and Brazil has always been on the spotlight around everything that concerns energy transition, decarbonization of the economy, and how we face global warming and climate change in general. So I was asked to speak a bit about some financial instruments that make a lot of sense for our audience here. So I'd like to speak about Black Invest, which is a very innovative instrument. It is an instrument for currency risk mitigation, but not only that, it is an instrument that is regulated under 4 lines. One line of blended finance, another line. Now I have to look at my notes just to get the exact name. The facility of long-term currency liquidity, fostering currency protection, and structuring of projects. What's interesting in Convest is that we know that there is a big challenge for an investor that is interested in placing resources and investing in certain industries in Brazil, but knowing that they're going to have revenue in reals and subject to currency volatility. So what we have is that EcoInvest, the National Treasury, comes in as taking up part of this currency risk in order to bring more predictability and more perennity to foreign investors. It is very interesting that EcoInvest also acts in a bid system. We had a first fundraising with the IDB, and through the climate fund, a bid system is going to be open to financial institutions, be them public or private, where the institutions are going to make themselves available to capture the available resources from the climate fund, and they need to complement these resources with foreign investment. So it is up to the institution to make this addition to, of course, finance sustainable projects. And then there is a timeline so that they can manage to bring these projects from strategic sectors. In case they don't manage to do that, they have to return these resources, but at a cost with the Selic rates. So as I was saying before, EcoInvest is regulated in 4 lines, and so far the blended finance line was the first line number 1, the one that has been subject to regulation, and now we're working on regulating the 3 other lines, which are long-term volatility, currency protection, and project structuring. And then the CBI asked me, so what are the challenges that you face, for example, for EcoInvest? And I would say that the structuring of projects is still a bottleneck, because as they are sectors that are just starting, we understand that not always the agents are able to structure projects with a very robust analysis of the economic and financial feasibility of the projects.
For some sectors, we see that there's a challenge in terms of the legal nature of the agents, and this doesn't really affect these more traditional sector. For example, renewable energy can be already considered a renewed sector, or a traditional sector, sorry. But for bioeconomy projects, many times the legal nature of the agents don't really fit or can't really offer any warranties or guarantees, no access to credit. So there are some bottlenecks that we have already identified. And lastly, the guarantee on the financial agents side as well, because they need to follow very strict rules that are traditional. But sometimes, since we really want to take these quantum leap to one sector or another, we need to be a bit bold. We need to be really bold, as we say in English. So, and sometimes we see that there's a little bit of a rigidity in terms of how we work on the regulations for the system. And to wrap up my part here, also talking about other instruments, I would like to highlight that since the climate fund has been strengthened during our management, so since we have the renewable emissions from the National Treasury with emissions of 2 billion USD last year, which allowed us to send 10 billion to the fund, and this has been in operation since 2009. But historically, the fund wasn't really relevant in terms of the volume. So it was just something around 300 to 500 million withdrawals. Now we have a fund with 10 billion per year. So actually to fund a myriad of projects in different sectors. I would also like to highlight the Brazilian sustainable taxonomy and the regulation for the mandatory carbon market. So these are two instruments that can really help to guide the agents towards strategic sectors for environmental transformation. I'm not going to go too much into in depth here because I'm running out of time, but I want to say that we do have the Ministry of Finance that's going to talk about taxonomy. The technical leader at the ministry will discuss this topic, and this is going to be incredibly important because several agents will be able to use it, not just investors who are interested in bringing more sustainable projects to their portfolio, but also regulatory agents, financial agents, and so on. So this is how I wrap up. I think I've gone on too long, and once again, thank you.
You've got a huge agenda. I mean, the important thing from us, from our perspective in the audience, is there is a lot of work happening to support this agenda going through. Exactly how it pans out, what works, what doesn't work, I appreciate is part of the tough part of your job. And I know there'll be lots of people in the audience here who will have views to share. And one of the good things, I guess, about you being here is as a symbol of the consultative nature of your work in terms of talking to industry and finance about how to make this happen, which is a critical issue going forward, right? We need capital to flow and flow smoothly and quickly to the right areas. And there are many aspects of that, including, by the way, gender issues. I'm just going to a little sidebar here, by the way. Notice how many women we've got in the audience. This is not the same as a normal banking conference. Normal banking conference are mainly men in suits like the two of us. Sustainable finance has got an extraordinary quotient of leadership by women, and this is a really important symbolic part of this change. Men have messed up the planet. Let's be very clear about that. unless we have a change of leadership, we are not likely to have the change that we need to have. So anyway, that's just an opinion, just a sidebar for you. But notice this is a special event from that perspective, and great to have you here, Carolina, in that process. But I want to now go to CAF, because of course the point about this conference is it's Latin America. And these changes, the growth of sustainable finance is happening in Colombia, in Mexico, in lots of countries. So, Sergio, give us a bit of a flavour for the Brazilian-dominated audience of what you see happening and where this is going, the sustainable finance market.
Okay. I don't know if this is working, Sean. Well, good morning to everyone.
Can you hear everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, can you hear me? Thank you. Good morning. Okay. Well, first of all, let me introduce a little bit what we're doing to support the desenvolvimiento investimentos privados. Well, I'm working as a director for productive sectors for CAF, which is a multilateral development bank with 24 shareholders countries and 13 commercial banks, and we are operating throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. The private sector vice presidency is headquartered in Sao Paulo, and we are aiming to contribute to regional development by generating and measuring impact through different private sector operations. We aspire to become the region's green bank, and we are supporting the energy transition through debt and equity. We cover many sectors, including renewable, non-conventional energy generation, transmission, green hydrogen derivatives, circular economy, urban electric mobility, and industrial projects leveraging clean, abundant, and affordable energy, what we call the power soaring. We are also keen on supporting social infrastructure and other types of infra, and we are collaborating also with commercial banks to support SMEs and venture capital innovation through partners like equity and debt funds managers. So, at this moment, we are working on different sectors that they have high potential for immediate investment in Brazil, to expand this sustainable market and support economic transition. So, as I have said, well, we are very keen on financing renewable energy, green infrastructure, sustainable transport. As I said, we are replacing diesel buses by electric buses in many countries, collaborating with the Green Climate Fund.
Which makes the air cleaner for everyone. We can breathe finally, right?
Yes, correct.
These are really important measures.
Yes. We are also working on sustainable tourism, ecotourism, sustainable hotels, waste management, and low carbon industry. What else can I say? What I see at this moment is that during the last few years, it has grown a lot, the growth and awareness and implementation of financial practices that consider ESG criteria. But for the next decade, what we see in Brazil is that we expect an increased regulation promoting sustainable practices. We also see sustainable investment that will continue to grow, driven by institutional investors. We also see that development of green financial products like green bonds and sustainable funds. Also, we see that companies will face pressure to transparency and ESG reporting. Also, we see that it's important education and sustainable finance that will become more widespread. And I would say also that technology will play a crucial role in monitoring sustainable practices. And finally, I would end up saying that sustainable finance will focus on social and environmental impact, renewable energy, and financial inclusion.
Fantastic. And you come a long way at CAF in terms of engagement on this issue and refocusing your agenda around addressing these immediate challenges to our societies. How do you see that across the other countries in Latin America? How much are we likely to see the growth of sustainable finance markets compared to Brazil? Is it across the region the same, or are there differences?
No, I think that there are countries that are more advanced. We see this also with fund managers. We see that Brazil and Mexico are countries that are a little bit more advanced, also Chile and Colombia, and the rest of the countries are lying a little bit behind. But we are trying to support all these countries in this development.
And the agenda about crowding in private capital, fairly important to a lot of the audience here. Where is that in CAF at the moment in terms of blended finance measures or supporting? Are there initiatives that you've got that we should know about coming forward that would help that?
I think that besides these equity and debt instruments, we're very focused on working with funds from Asia, from Middle East, that they provide through us, because we are the agent bank, technical cooperations to develop not only infrastructure, preparation facilities for PPPs, but also for studies, to support the market. We have been working in the ILAC initiative. We have been leading that. And well, I would say, yes, that technical cooperations are quite important at CAF. They could be reimbursable for the private projects and not reimbursable for private for sovereign projects, or sometimes even for the private projects as well.
This is very cool. And this is what's happening in development banks around the world, this conversation about how we mobilize capital. And of course, we have another development bank on the stage, a rather big one, BNDES. Victor, can I go to you now? And you've been given an extraordinary mandate by the Ministry of Finance to grow lending in Brazil and help drive these changes. What does that mean for the sustainable finance market? Everything from bond issuance, which I know is an area that you know a lot about, to other measures that we really should be aware of, because BNDES is an elephant in the room in terms of what it does. We all need to be conscious of what's happening in the future.
Obrigado, Sean. Bom dia, plateia. Bom dia.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for inviting me to be here this morning. It's a pleasure to be here sharing this panel, sharing this discussion with you on behalf of BNDES. In June is the anniversary month for the bank. This month, it'll be 72 years for the bank. So when we think about a Brazilian institution that is working towards development for 72 years and continues to work on this, because Brazil has a clean energy matrix beyond its natural resources, there is an instrument to fund these projects. In 2024, maybe the most important topic for BNDES right now, and for future generations when they look back, they remember, is the climate crisis, the fight against the climate crisis. As Sean remembered, we have a very important mandate to increase loans here in Brazil. This is something the bank has always done. It is a leader. It has been a leader for quite a while. We've been thinking about these topics. We have sustainable initiatives since 2017. So I am very enthusiastic to see what we are facing right now. The climate fund, as Carolina said, the Fundo Clima, was created in 2019, but it hasn't really taken off. Now we have $10 billion with the FX risk equalized by the Treasury. So the bank can invest. It has the capacity to attract resources, and we can originate projects. The bank can also provide a full platform for sustainable investments, because this is the model. We think that if we're able to originate, to distribute, to share projects with private capital, the bank does have this very relevant role. So how do we do all of this? How do we go back to our history, or to historic trajectory for the Brazilian economy? We need to naturally access new sources, new resource sources, and that's my specialty. As Sean remembered, we had the first emission of green bond by a Brazilian bank in 2017. we issued green bonds. The bank has been working on this for quite a while, and we have the capacity to attract private resources for the bank's balance. For the banks, we've been working on approving the LCDs. I think you must have read about the approval here in Congress. It's going to be voted in the Senate, and this is going to be another instrument not only for BNDES, but also other regional development banks, such as BDMG and the Bank of the South. So we're going through the transition moment. The bank is becoming proeminent again, becoming a leader again. Brazil is now a leader for the G20, and I think we are able to lead the agenda against climate crisis, when what we saw in the South was really everything we've been discussing for many years. And it makes us think about not only mitigating, but how do we rebuild after the crisis. And this is something that's been on our agenda, the specific funds for reconstruction, because these disasters will continue to happen, and we see this every day. So I am very positive. I have a very positive expectation for the bank. We are, through these 72 years, we've done a lot, but we still have a lot to be done. We have blended finance instruments. We're building a full platform. We're sharing this with the market to structure debentures for important projects. I believe that the bank is the big agent to drive these innovations. It has been for 70 years, will continue to be the leader, and has full capacity to lead this agenda in Brazil for the next few years.
Much more to do in the future. Carolina outlined some of the things that are coming through, which you'll be no doubt having support. I have to ask you a very specific question, which Vic, that you probably can't answer. We've seen issuance of bonds in samurai, US dollars, euros, as in Japan yen. Will we see more currencies going forward? Is that on your plate? Are you looking at that? I mean, I have a particular interest, is that I've been speaking with the People's Bank of China a couple of weeks ago about growing green panda issuance. That is bilateral deals where we issue debt in China to settle Chinese export accounts. And I think one of the things we need to do in general is to widen the pool of currency and investor exposure where interest rates are attractive. So I'm putting him on the spot here. Is that in your thinking at all? Are you looking at that issue in Treasury? CNY issuance. Carolina, it's more, we can ask Victor to answer if you prefer, but multiple currencies is really the question.
Eu posso responder, mas
I can answer, but I'm not going to answer your question at the end of the day, because I don't really work with the Treasury, right? That's a different department. It's not really part of the Ministry of Finance. I'm in the Executive Secretariat. So I can't really tell you if this is truly on their radar or not. But I do highlight that since we've issued very successfully last year with this international issuance at a very, very competitive rate, this was already seen as something extremely positive, as a win. And
an amazing deal. Mas é verdade.
We were very happy with the result. And I believe this is a major sign of an interest in how the world is looking at Brazil as an important player in this arena. Well, if I can, what we see in sovereigns with more trenches and more frequency in sustainable debt markets, they're trying to build interest curves in different currencies with different pool of investors. So we're trying to see how you're going to see the yield curve in these markets, and as you mentioned, mitigating some risks, some FX risks. So if you have presidential election in a country, how does this sustainable curve yield behaves compared to other countries? So although Brazil started with one trench, with a very successful trench, as you said, but we're looking at other countries, and we believe that this could come here and you start building better curves.
Particular global challenge of US dollar as a reserve currency. We're all a prey of the Fed raising its rates for domestic reasons. You know, if the presidential election leads to a new president, we could see a lot of volatility in the coming years. So having exposure to other currencies and increasing bilateral trade in other currencies is a critical part of changing the global architecture. It's the background to it. But it's got to be opportunistic in terms of where interest rates are and so on. So we'll park that as an idea. But Rafael, of course, represents, you know, an agency that has done an amazing turn in the last 10 years. I'm going to say, I sat down at the president of S&P in New York and at a lunch 8 years ago, who announced, to my surprise, that S&P was going to now really needed to look at the risks involved in climate. And since then, they've been developing all these range of products and services around sustainability, including Sustainability One, which is a whole unit which looks at supporting investors. It's been an amazing journey, but what I really want you to talk about is what it looks like going forward, given where you are now, and how do you see the market development, appetite for investors, appetite amongst your clients? Is it working?
Thanks for the question, Shen. And I must say, the most enthusiastic moderator I ever had, so thanks for that. Switching to Portuguese again. Bom dia, pessoal.
So good morning, everyone. As a good moderator, Sean changed the question last minute, but I'll do my best. I think many of you hear S&P ratings, and you think about what we're looking at in the just financial and credit point of view. But few know that we have 70 sustainable finance analysts. They don't work with finance or credit, so we are fully dedicated to sustainability. And with different backgrounds, you have PhDs in several themes, anthropologists, political scientists, specific people for corporate governance. So many of the background that Sean mentioned comes from this context that people still don't know about. And talking about market trends in Latin America, I think we see two main trends. One, as any developing market, was much focused in single names and sectors. Now we are starting to see more diversification. So Brazil is the most pulverized market in this sense, with a few more than 200 issuers that have accessed this market. And the second country, which is Mexico, it's just a bit more than 50. So there is a gap between the two largest economies in Latin America. So it's still a very diversified market. He included in the question, so how is the investor appetite with these deals? I think a big benefit of these issuances that most of them is this, the base of investors being diversified. In the past, they had a very specific pocket. Now they see bigger diversification. So you see different mandates from institutional investors worldwide interested in investing in Brazil. Finance in Motion is here to talk about this. And this has brought increasingly more appetite to this international market. But for our local market, I think it is an important trend that we see in some sense. Last year, we had the history for sustainable debt, more than $50 billion. When you look at 2021, 21 was fully based on international markets. We were, the market was good, low interest rates, so more than 70% of the debt was in dollar, in foreign currency. For 22 and 23, this has been switched. We see a switch to more local currency. In 2023, much stronger with more than 50% of debt issued in local currencies. This has some catalyzers. The market dynamics is important. But one catalyzing aspect that we generally have been identifying in the market, which is the development of local taxonomies, attract some issuers, some investors that were not comfortable with some of the dynamics and features that were customized for the local markets. So this brings credibility and some backup for this type of issuance in the market. And we also see the participation of local institutional investors changing these dynamics. The most emblematic example we have at the moment is in Mexico. pension funds in the past 3 years, they have placed several guidelines for several sectors of the economy, which has fostered the issuance of debt in the private market. So in the past 12 months in Mexico, more than 50% of the debt issued was labeled as sustainable. This from strong institutional investor in the country. This movement might come from other countries, but there are other players in the market. In Brazil, we see development banks doing this work, multilateral agencies also placing a lot of money and also fostering advisory and debt structuring work for issuers that did not have the green, social, and sustainable label. So this will contribute to this dynamics.
This market is this is not just the US, Europe. It's not just Latin America, although it is amazing how it's changing, right? But it's also in Asia. We saw 30% of all debt issued in Southeast Asia last year by corporates being thematic. In Japan, it was between 20 and 25% of all debt issued was thematic. In China, it's going gangbusters. The market has nearly doubled in the last 3 years. It's gone up again on a curve. This movement is kind of everywhere. But as you say, infrastructure is what's required. Taxonomies help and so on. And of course, underpinning this is the nature of policies to create more investments that we can invest in. Because, one of the weird things that's happened with sovereign issuance globally, that we now have 50 sovereigns issuing sustainable debt of various sorts around the world. This is fantastic. This is half the regular sovereign bond issuers. And bonds, sovereign bonds are 50% of the market. They all have a problem finding more stuff. They have successful programs. They want to do more. The Japanese, for example, got so excited at their first bond in February, they immediately announced a doubling of the program size in 2024. They got a 1.5 basis points premium on their first bond, which for Japanese bonds, the spreads are so tight, it's incredible. But they can't find enough things to invest in. And this is actually the dynamic we want to create. We want to make it pressure internally on governments, sorry, Carolina, for the other ministries to find stuff and to expand their climate programs and grow it. But it is very interesting. And in Mexico, we've had problems getting enough social investments actually funded by the program, which is a symptom of really what's going on here. This is not about debt issuance. Debt issuance is the symptom, is the tool, gets people to do stuff, and there are benefits for treasuries, as Carolina pointed out earlier, but it gets the conversation and gets the dynamic going within corporations and in governments in a way that just doesn't happen otherwise. It's an icebreaker tool, is the key point. Of course, your business is growing now, right? Now, I just want to ask him. I've wanted to ask him. How much is the business growing? What percentage of S&P's business is becoming sustainable nowadays? Get us excited.
Yeah, I will disappoint you. O problema é que
the problem is I'm from the analytics team, and at S&P we have a very well-defined Chinese wall between analytics and commercial. So I don't have access to the business figures. I'm fully focused in the analysis. So I'm not allowed. I cannot share this with you. But what I can share. What I can share, and you mentioned some percentages in several regions. In our calculations last year, using environmental finance database, the thematic issuances are around 28% in the region. The public information that I am allowed to share from environmental finance, when you look at the market share for SPO providers, Sustainalytics has 19.2% of global market share. S&P 19.1, so it's a tie. And the main reason S&P was growing exponentially with time and organically, but at the end of 22, we acquired Cicero Shades of Green. I don't know if you know it, but it's an arm from the research institute at the Oslo University, a group of scientists that created a methodology that was recognized for green bonds. So the first World Bank bond, IFC, they used this methodology. Today, the only methodology approved for the green label equity from NASDAQ, it is the Cicero Shades of Green methodology. They also, for 3 years, they were leaders in SPOs for green bonds globally. So there is a whole story from this group of scientists, and we incorporated and integrated the methodology and the group of scientists into our team. So we were 60 scientists globally. Now we have 70 because there were 10 of them on their side. And this made us indirectly, it was not the intention that we doubled market share in this market.
What can I say? I know them. Okay. Look, I need to wrap up because I've got over time. My apologies. I just have such fun on this conversation. I'd like some final comments about where we're going. And I might ask, if I can, CAF to kick us off, because of a Latin American perspective, the outlook. This is the name of the title. Bit of the outlook. And then we'll go to BNDES, then we'll go to S&P, and we'll finish up with Carolina.
Where we're going? I would say that, well, first of all, I think one thing that I want to elaborate a little bit before this, no? What we see is that this kind of instruments of sustainable bonds can help a lot to accelerate transition to low carbon economy, as we have said, no? Because they attract investors, and there is even more and more investors, institutional investors interested in positive environmental and social impacts. No? And to accelerate this transition for the future, we need to develop these liquid secondary markets, technologies like blockchain and for transparency and blended finance. In our case, for example, we're working on blended finance, for example, with the Green Climate Fund and with other kind of allies, but we are also working on blockchain platforms with external consultants. This software is going to connect us to institutional investors, and we are going to offer them the possibility to invest in sustainable bonds, thematic bonds, also SPVs for infrastructure, green infrastructure, etc. Also, we are working for the future in education and training on sustainable finance. I think this is essential, and the implementation also of robust certifications and standards to increase confidence and adoptions of these instruments. And I think with all of this, we believe that Brazil and, generally speaking, the rest of the region can mobilize significant capital for sustainable development.
Thank you. The investor appetite, by the way, which you raised, I'm on the advisory committee of the French sovereign bond. They issued a bond, a large bond, 8 billion, 5 billion, I think, in January. They were 20 times oversubscribed. 20 times. That is extraordinary, right? And we're still getting similar oversubscription levels. You know, the Brazilian one was pretty good, but globally, this is still going. Please, Victor, your thoughts.
I think that as a final message, the bank has, again, restarted with this agenda of raising and the protagonism in the climate agenda. Last year, we raised $3.2 billion, not in bonds. We've been a bit absent from the bonds market, but we've done a lot. Então, vão voltar para o mercado de... We have done a lot with multilateral bonds, so I understand that although we haven't done this internationally, we have a very large avenue in local market. We've been looking at the local market very carefully. There is a new instrument to be approved in Congress that will open an avenue. We've been working hard on that. Today, we don't have a curve on the international market, but it's also an instrument the bank has access if conditions change or if we manage to access markets with better cost efficiency. Remember, in BNDES internalizes these resources, so we have a holding tax aspect that increases the cost of this work abroad. And as we have access to many other sources that are more effective in terms of cost and access to local market, to incentivize bonds, we have raised resources from these other sources. But we have been following the market, the sovereign market, and at some point, if there's an interesting window, the bank can access the market, as we did with the first Brazilian green bond in 2017. So we're absent, but we keep our relationship with the investing community. We maintain an active relationship with these players. We recreated the international area in the bank that captures resources not only for the bank balance through these instruments, but again, as an investment platform that structures projects, that looks for partners that go around the world, bring resources to co-invest with the BNDES label. What BNDES brings to the table, it's 17 years understanding the country and the projects and things about the country in the long term. So this history of the bank is mixed with the economic history of the country. So in the future, I'm sure that the bank will remain relevant. The bank responds to the society demands. Today, it is the most transparent public institution in Brazil. So I'm sure, Sean, that the future is green, is brilliant, it is sustainable, and the bank will continue to play its leadership role in this theme. Thank you.
Bom, o Sean pediu para
Sean asked me just to try to recap. So what I see for the future is that any sector has something to contribute around climate change. But from what was said here, everything that we talk about, investments in infrastructure, capital-intensive investments, it can last for decades. So reinvesting this, it's going to take decades to be done again. So for me, it's a yellow flag or a red flag. For any infrastructure today that is not considering environmental aspects when you place capital in them. So, for example, basic sanitation here in Brazil. Years ago, we had 3 or 4 players that looked for thematic bonds, looking at this environmental risk aspect. Today, in the market, almost all of them have that label. So it is a must to have the label. Otherwise, it is a red flag for the market. So I hope this trend goes to other markets. And talking about Latin America, we represent 5-6% of the global sustainable debt market. But in our region, it's one of the markets that we've seen most innovation. So when we look at the first sovereign having a social KPI, such as in Chile, or exchange offers, or last year Latin America as leader for blue bonds globally. So there are several customizations in our market due to social environmental demands that we have that allow this type of innovation, and it is interesting for the market. So we're all the time, we've been receiving new stakeholders wanting to create new things for the market. There is space for this tropicalization. But of course, we need scientific base. We need safeguards around social and greenwashing issues. But still, it is a market with a large appetite, both for foreign investors and also local investors who start implementing these metrics internally. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolina, final thoughts on the future.
Sean, I think that there's no way back. That's how I see it. In ecology, there is a concept called emerging properties, which states that the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. So what we're discussing here today, it's not just about niche. I think the agents have a lot of interest, actually, in catalytic capital, blended finance, and sustainable and thematic bonds. And it is key aspects that will make up this whole that is more than the mere sum of the parts. And I'm not saying it, as I said, it's just not just niche, because we have increasingly more placed these instruments worldwide, and they have been giving very satisfactory return. I'm not even talking about financial return. I'm talking about return for what we want. We can see concrete results. We can see portfolios are getting greener, with less carbon intensive. They are more aligned to the Paris Agreement goals and what is defended by science. So I see that actually there are increasingly more agents interested in that, more governments mobilizing and coordinating to do that. And just to wrap up in terms of norms, I think that we're placing a lot of instruments on the table. I mentioned the carbon regulated market. I mentioned the taxonomy. I did not mention, but infrastructure debentures, incentivized debentures. So all this bucket of instruments, be them financial or tax instruments or normative instruments, in a more strict sense, they are going to make up this whole that is bigger than the sum of the parts that we wish for. Thank you.
Say thank you. What a wonderful panel.